Okay, everyone, I hope you are well. Now, as I promised on yesterday's video, today's video is going to be a deep dive into Wilfried Nancy because, whether you're for or against his appointment as Celtic manager, and right now I'd say it's fairly even, certainly based on the comments for yesterday's video. One thing that none of us can deny is that we don't actually know too much about him. So let me try and change that for you today. Of all the videos I've ever done, this is by far the most research I've ever put into a video. I think my Google Docs thing that I use is 14 pages long. So I don't know how long this video is going to turn out to be. But basically, I've just kind of gone through Wilfried Nancy's life and obviously particularly his journey as a manager so far. Just so we basically know, not everything about him, obviously, but we kind of know a bit more about his journey. And I will go into tactical stuff a little bit and a few other things as we get into it. But yeah, that's the plan for today's video, for by the end of this for you to know a lot more about him. And I should just say a big thanks to Practical CBT for sponsoring this show. If you're a guy looking to get your head in a better place, just like you train on the pitch, they've got 10-minute online workouts and coaching sessions that can make a real difference. And as a Celtic AM viewer or listener, you can get a big discount. Just click on the link in the description. I will also pin it as a comment as well. Right, let's get on with this. So just first of all, the latest on Nancy to Celtic, again coming from Michael Gannon at the Daily Record yesterday. He says we are edging closer to securing Nancy as our new boss after a weekend of talks. So discussions started on Friday. We're hoping to have him appointed as our new manager by this Friday. We have the AGM taking place at Celtic Park on Friday morning. We then have the game against St Mirren on Saturday evening. He has at least 12 months remaining on his Columbus Crew contract. I've kind of touched on this before. It's not quite clear exactly when that's up, but appears to have at least 12 months remaining. So we're going to have to pay compensation for Nancy, I think between £1 and £2 million. That's not said to be an issue. It seems like he'd be bringing in his own coaching team as well, including long-time assistant Kwame Ampadu, former Ireland international. But there was a mention in Michael Gannon's report that Nancy would be willing to have a local coach on board as well. Does that mean Mark Fotheringham's staying on? Probably more likely to be Gavin Strachan or even maybe Sean Maloney. So that's all to be sorted out. I think this is going to progress pretty quickly over the next few days. And barring any, as I said yesterday, any Eddie Howe hitches, still not ordered my mug, we're going to have Wilfried Nancy appointed as our new manager in the coming days. So Nancy was born in April 1977 in Le Havre. Been working on that, a city in Normandy in the north of France. His father was from Guadeloupe, which, as I'm sure you'll know, is a French overseas territory. His mother was of Senegalese/Cape Verdean descent. His father was in the French Navy, so in his early years, Nancy was moving around the globe, a number of different locations around the planet before eventually settling in France. I was watching an interview that he's done with the Men in Blazers YouTube channel. You may well have had it recommended to you, alongside my stuff, of course, on the home feed. I'm kind of halfway through watching it. But yeah, Nancy talks about, without that global travelling as a kid, he wouldn't be where he is right now. So he really puts a lot of stock into, what was achieved in his early years, the opportunity he had to understand different people from different lives, I guess, and developing empathy even at that very young age. So, aged 11, his family settle in Toulon, which is in southern France. A few years later, he starts playing in the academy at Sporting Club Toulon. He was clearly a talented player because he makes it all the way to actually playing professionally for them. The highest level he ever played at in his playing career was for them in Ligue 2, which is obviously the second tier of French football. So a pretty capable player. In total, his playing career only lasted around 10 years. I've not quite been able to get to the bottom of exactly why that was the case. I don't think it was like an injury or anything like that is often the case, but I think maybe more that he kind of dropped through the levels. He ended up with a couple of teams in the National, the third tier of French football, and even into the CFA, which is French amateur football. So there's a fair chance that he just didn't really fancy continuing to play after 10 years. And I think he's gone on record as saying that even while he was playing, he kind of was thinking of his coaching career already. So, he was a central defender. He was known more for his ability to read the game rather than like being a commanding physical presence. One of his old coaches described him as an intelligent and calm player. So that gives a little bit of insight into his personality. In 2005 or 2006, he made the decision to move to Montreal in Canada. He says that his early life travelling around the globe had told him that he wanted to go out of his comfort zone, try something different, leave the south of France and go to Canada. His mother and sister were living in New York at the time. I think he initially wanted to go there, but there was maybe visa complications. Obviously Montreal's like French speaking, isn't it? So I'm guessing it would have been easier for a French citizen to go to Montreal. He'd had a friend move out to Canada a year before and his friend was talking it up. So he initially travelled to Canada. I think he's kind of late 20s at this point, maybe 27 or 28 years old. He's 48 at the moment, so this is 20 years ago. And he initially travelled for a 2-week holiday. He says he got a good feeling in Canada, and he made a point in this interview I was watching of talking about like getting a gut feeling. I think he really trusts his gut when he's making decisions, and he says if he doesn't get that really kind of good feeling, then he'll know this decision he's going to make isn't for him. So he makes that. He enjoys his first couple of weeks in Canada, and he tells himself, I'm going to give it a year here. So he's still playing here for the University of Quebec at Montreal team, and that's in the Quebec University League. He actually won MVP in that league, stuck around though in Canada, and I think he's working at the time as well, but is also kind of less interested in playing now and starts going into the coaching. As has been well documented, his first job in coaching is with an under-14 girls team. Now, that's obviously something that's been used to take away credibility from him. I would view it the other way, and I would look at it kind of being a measure of how far he's come in the game. And also, like, this is not Thierry Henry we're talking about, someone who like had a wonderful playing career to fall back on and automatically was given opportunities as a manager. Wilfried Nancy is someone who's had to start right at the bottom, and no disrespect to that under-14s girls team, but that's, a pretty low place to start. And for him to rise through the levels to become an MLS Coach of the Year and now quite possibly the manager of Celtic, I guess shows, what a journey he's been on and how much credit he deserves for going up all of those levels. So rather than using the under-14 girls team to devalue Nancy and his achievements, I would look at it the other way. So he becomes a coach at Montreal. It's Montreal Impact at this stage. It's now called CF Montreal. He's a coach at their academy from its inception in 2011. He was a head coach of the under-18s from 2011 to 2013. He's head coach of the under-21s in 2014. And then the under-16s in 2014 and 15. So he's with Montreal at all this time. He then becomes first team assistant in 2016 and was then made manager in March 2021. That's after Thierry Henry decided to leave his post as Montreal manager so that he could move back to London, I think, and be closer to his kids during the COVID pandemic. So the stars kind of aligned for Nancy at that point, and he gets his first managerial gig at long last in March 2021, just after Neil Lennon was leaving us during the COVID season, which gives you an idea of how long he's been a manager for. It's just over 4.5 years. So yeah, he's been a manager for only 4.5 years, and that's something, people have mentioned, and that is true. I do think you've also got to mention the fact that he was assistant manager at MLS level for 5 years before then, and even prior to that, he was coaching for another 10 plus years at various levels. So it's not as if he's new to coaching and was playing 5 years ago and went straight in. He's been part of the non-football and part of football, make more sense, Hamish, aka coaching for 20 years. And as I said, he was even thinking about coaching when he was playing. So he's not new to coaching, even though he is relatively new to management. So he comes into the manager's job at CF Montreal, no experience of being a manager at that point, which I guess is interesting. It shows that he had shown something for them to trust him with their biggest job, even though he'd never been a manager. They did say something in their statement at the time, part of the club's philosophy to consider and promote our own. So that may explain why they went for Nancy. A lot of talk of him coming into Celtic right now, when we clearly have a lot of different issues that he'll have to contend with, both on and off the pitch, especially at the moment, the way the squad is. And we're still, 6-7 weeks out from the January transfer window where he can change the squad. I think it's worth just looking at his start to life at Montreal, because it was far from easy for him in terms of the situation that he went into. And this is from an MLS profile piece shortly after his arrival. So it talks about, Nancy's appointment only been made official days before the start of pre-season. When he walked out to his first training session, half of the players were academy players. Most of the first team was awaiting travel or on international duty. He didn't conduct a practice training with his full squad until days before his first MLS game. Montreal only had 2 friendlies arranged instead of the typical 5. His opening match was a 4-2 win over Toronto, with former Celtic Victor Wanyama scoring for Montreal in that. Alistair Johnson's still at Nashville at this stage. He'll join 9 months or so later. But yeah, most of all, the COVID-19 pandemic meant that Montreal were in Florida. All of their home games had been in Fort Lauderdale at Inter Miami Stadium. So a lot for Nancy to contend with as he goes into Montreal, on and off the pitch. Players not been in training, as I say, they're not even playing in Montreal, they're playing in Miami due to COVID. In his first managerial gig, taking over from Thierry Henry. They did fine in his first season, nothing spectacular. They ended up finishing 10th in the Eastern Conference. However, just 2 months into his opening season, Montreal exercised the option to extend his contract for the following season. So they'd clearly seen enough from him. At the time, their sporting director, Olivier Renard, said, "I'm making this decision now because I see the work he puts in every day, the playing philosophy during games, as well as the relationship between the players and the coaching staff, which has been very positive since day one. I am confident for the future." Now, Montreal did win silverware in his first season. They won the Canadian Championship, which, again, I'm sure you'll be aware of this, but it's an annual tournament which is contested by the Canadian MLS side. So that's Montreal, Toronto and Vancouver Whitecaps, as well as teams who actually play in Canada. And I'm not going to make out that this is some mega achievement. He was effectively up against 2 other similar level sides, the MLS teams. But he did win the tournament, and it is worth pointing out that Montreal haven't won it since, and this was 2021. So I think he does deserve some amount of credit. It wasn't a complete gimme to win the competition. He still had to win some games. I think they beat was it maybe Vancouver or Toronto they beat in the final. So I think he deserves some sort of credit for winning that. The following season, he's now got Alistair Johnson as part of his team. This is 2022. Montreal have a great season. They rose to 2nd in the Eastern Conference, 3rd in the MLS overall. The team recorded 20 wins. They got 65 points, which were both club records. So he set club records. And they were top 5 in the league for goals scored as well. They were eliminated in the Eastern Conference semi-finals by New York City. Nancy finished second in the voting for the 2022 MLS Coach of the Year as well. Apparently lost by 1/10 of a percentage to the eventual winner. So very close to being MLS Coach of the Year in just his second season. Things are going well at Montreal. He's clearly doing an incredible job, to be honest. He's been talked up, yet he leaves them at the end of that season with the Columbus Crew arranging a financial settlement, not just to get Nancy, but to get some of his backroom team as well. Assistant coach Kwame Ampadu, fitness coach Jules Guegan, and video analysis Maxime Chalier. They may be names that we have to keep an eye on because they may well be coming to Celtic. I certainly think Ampadu is pretty nailed on to join Nancy at Celtic. So at the time, the Montreal statement from President and CEO Gabriel Gervais said, despite the club's efforts to have Wilfried continue our project, we were forced to accept his decision to leave the organisation. We want people who want to be with us, and Wilfried has chosen a different path. To be fair, Montreal did also thank him for his efforts, and obviously been at the club for probably well over a decade at that point, and a couple of years as manager. So generally it was quite nice, but clearly something had gone on here. And yeah, it appears that the main reason for his surprise exit from Montreal was an altercation that he had with the club's owner, a guy called Joey Saputo, who seems like an interesting figure. I think Montreal Stadium is named after him, which tells you the kind of ego you're probably dealing with here. So there's a Canada-based journalist, a guy called Jeremy Filosa, who posted an article, and his outlet, 98.5 FM, had spoken to 8 people who were apparently privy to this major incident, and they all wished to remain anonymous. So this is all kind of turning a bit murder mystery here. But yeah, just very quickly, the story here goes that on July the 9th, Montreal hosted Kansas City at Stade Saputo. Yep, that's the guy's name. One of the worst teams in the MLS, Kansas City. The Impact had lost its last 2 matches and was playing without its best player, Jordi Mihailovic, who had been sidelined since mid-May. The team's record at that point was 9-7-2. So, yeah, basically all of this stuff about mistakes being made for player, not totally relevant. The important bit, after the defeat, Joey Saputo, frustrated by the result, went down to the locker room to speak to the players and or the coach. But at the door, he was met by Wilfried Nancy, who was insistent. He clearly didn't want the owner to come in. According to our sources, the confrontation was intense. Strong words were exchanged between the two sides, words which, in many cases, leave no room for turning back. According to some rumours, which we have not been able to confirm, Saputo was particularly displeased with the management of the goalkeepers. One thing remains certain, however, is that after this encounter, the goalkeeper finally regained his position of number 1. Moments after the altercation, Saputo went back up to the second floor and shared his feelings with his president, Gabriel Gervais. A journalist that was there witnessed the scene and reported it in the newspaper. According to our information, Saputo felt that he was being addressed disrespectfully by Nancy. After the incident, some players immediately thought it was all over for their coach. He would either leave or be fired, but none of that ultimately happened. What we are told is that Renard and Gervais spoke with the most important members of the player group to ask for their support in getting through this difficult situation. Nancy was even considering leaving the club at that precise moment, according to our information. After discussing it with some players and management, Nancy decided to stay, but on 2 conditions. There would be no contract negotiations for the remainder of the season, the club would not exercise the option in his contract, and everything had to remain confidential. I think that's 3 conditions, but we'll let this slide. Renard and Gervais agreed to these conditions in order to keep their coach in the position. Clearly the intervention worked. The team only lost 1 match in the second half of the season. The players rallied behind their coach. So that incident was probably like the straw that broke the camel's back. I think there's a fair chance that Nancy had been growing frustrated by the owner, Saputo, and like that was the kind of eventual incident that really got to him, and he wasn't letting him into the changing room under any circumstances. And I guess it shows that he's got a backbone. There's been a lot of chat about him being a yes man, Now, I'm just putting out there, would a yes man not just have let the owner in and said, yeah, no probs, you're paying me, etc. Nancy clearly felt that he was the manager and he was the one, to be in that dressing room and no one else really giving the players instructions. Now, I know for all their faults, we're not really getting Michael Nicholson or even Dermot Desmond demanding to get into the Celtic Park dressing room to talk to players. I don't think we've got to that point yet, so we probably don't have to worry about this kind of thing. But I think it does show that just people throwing out that Nancy's going to come in and be a complete yes man and just be happy to be at Celtic and not, have a backbone, basically. I think that's pretty unfair and not based on anything. I think he's a guy that has morals and strong beliefs and, won't be easily swayed and won't back down to various things that he feels aren't fair. And it should also be pointed out, the article did mention it there, like right after this point, Montreal go on an amazing run at the end of the season. They won 11 of their final 15 league matches. So the players were clearly on his side here. It galvanised them. And we even had the veteran forward, a guy called Kai Kamara, soon handed in a transfer request at Montreal after Nancy's departure was announced, saying that he was unhappy with Montreal's handling of Nancy's exit and that he wanted a reunion with him. So players like him. So we're at December 2022. Nancy's now in the US with the Columbus Crew. No break from football here. I think it's important to mention that. He's not going to get a break coming from Columbus Crew to Celtic. As much as he maybe doesn't have a lot of experience, over these last 4 years, and even going way back further with that, because obviously he's been assistant, he's been employed by clubs for 15 years, maybe longer than that. He's not had an unemployed day in that period, so he's getting the most out of his time. He's at Crew. Columbus Crew, that is. They have 2 of their best seasons ever under Nancy. That's not me saying it. That's things I read in 2 separate articles, one from the MLS and one from our Columbus Crew fan site. They finished 3rd overall in the MLS in his first season in 2023. They tie a franchise record, 57 points. They break the franchise record for goals scored, 67 of them in 34 matches. The previous year, Columbus Crew had been 16th, so he's taken them from 16th to 3rd in the overall MLS table in his first season, which is clearly pretty impressive. And that 3rd place finish gets them into the post-season playoffs. They defeated Atlanta United, Orlando City, Cincinnati and LAFC to win the MLS Cup, the 3rd time in the club's history. Now, I know people, again, have made the comment about, maybe taking away from his achievement and winning that and detracting from the MLS's system of deciding champions and saying that Nancy's team actually only finished 3rd that season. By European football's way of doing things, that's where they would have finished. So obviously the MLS is a bit like Australia and some other countries. It's a bit of a different system. I think it is probably a good time just to mention that the MLS is an incredibly equalised league. There's a number of reasons for that, but the main one is that they have a hard salary cap. Basically, no matter how rich a club or a club's owner is, they can only put in a certain amount of money into the squad. And I guess the MLS and American sports in general want a league where teams rise and fall rather than having a Paris Saint-Germain, Bayern Munich or Celtic situation where one team dominates the league for a number of years. That's not how, the MLS or any American sports work. So I was looking back, they've had 7 different MLS champions in the last 8 years. So it's difficult, very difficult to have some sort of success. So I think when people bring up he finished 7th in the MLS last season, or he's only got a X percentage winning record, and comparing it to life at Celtic, I just don't think that's fair at all. He's going to be coming to a club, Celtic, who have an advantage over, let's face it, every other club in Scotland in terms of the money we bring in, the support we have, the size of the club, the history. That wasn't the case in America, so far from it. So I think it's very important to mention that. he develops players, and I'll touch on that a wee bit at the end, but Cucho Hernandez won the MLS Cup MVP in that first season. He's now playing for Real Betis. I think they got like $16 million for him earlier this year from Betis. So that's evidence of Nancy developing a player who's like a Colombia international now. We know about Alistair Johnson. That's someone else who benefited under Wilfried Nancy. And yeah, you'd love to know what Alistair Johnson's making of all this and how excited he'll be to get back fit and play under his new manager, assuming that Nancy is appointed. So yeah, going to second season 2024, Crew got even better. They finished second in the overall MLS table behind only Lionel Messi's Inter Miami. In terms of the numbers that season, more club records for regular season points, for wins, for goals. So like he's breaking records. And I know MLS clubs aren't like that old, nowhere near as old as teams in the UK. But still, you know, breaking records shows that he's clearly doing something right. However, they were unable to repeat their playoff triumph. They lost in the first round to New York Red Bulls. However, Nancy finally, at the kind of third time of being on the shortlist, he wins the MLS Coach of the Year award in 2024. And they did also win silverware, more silverware in 2024. He wins the MLS Leagues Cup, which is a competition that features 36 teams from the MLS and also the Liga MX, which is the Mexican league, which is a relatively strong league. Certainly the big teams in Mexico, teams like Club America and Monterrey and Tigres and other teams have a fair bit of strength. So yeah, Columbus Crew win that competition with the MLS and Liga MX teams. They won all 5 rounds, including against Lionel Messi's Inter Miami. And yeah, I was looking back at the final. I had a weird thing in my head that I'd watched the final or watched highlights of the final. And I was right, because the final of this competition was a victory over LAFC. And there was actually a bit of Celtic interest in this match. Don't know if you can remember why, but there was a guy, Mateusz Boguts, that we were interested in just over a year ago. And he was playing in this game for LAFC. And I think there was a lot of talk about this being potentially his final game for them before moving to us. Little did we know, while some of us were watching Boguts play, the team that he was playing were managed by what will turn out to be a future Celtic manager. So it's interesting how things work out. Also in this second season for Nancy at Columbus Crew, they reached the final of the 2024 CONCACAF Champions Cup, which again features mainly MLS and Liga MX teams. There's also like the odd team from Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Jamaica, Honduras, but mainly Mexican and US teams. Over 2 legs, they defeated Houston Dynamo, they defeated a couple of Mexican teams, UANL and Monterrey as well, and they lose in the final to Pachuca. So I think there's a very clear pattern here of Nancy and his teams doing really well in cup competitions. That Canadian tournament that he won at Monterrey, the playoff league win with Columbus Crew, also the Leagues Cup, and reaching the final of the CONCACAF Champions Cup. So his teams appear to be very good in cup competition. He knows how to win things. He's won 3 trophies in 4.5 years, reached the final of the Champions Cup as well. So I think that's positive. Clearly, again, coming to Celtic where that's expected of him, the fact that he's got experience, I guess, of winning things, a history of winning things is important, and doing it in a more kind of level playing field as well, I think deserves credit. This season, however, wasn't as strong. I think it's important to acknowledge that. Columbus Crew dropped to 7th in the East. They were 12th overall in the MLS. Their overall record was 14 wins, 12 draws and 8 losses. So clearly a bit of a regression. Also in the cup competitions, they didn't do as well. They lost in the opening round of the playoffs to Cincinnati. There's a bit of chat, and this is very recent now. This is like the last game that they played was this defeat to Cincinnati, and the MLS uses like a 3-game series, and Cincinnati won the first and the third match. But overall, and if you put the aggregate scores together like we would do in Europe, Columbus Crew won 5-3. But they went out because the MLS doesn't adopt that system. They just do a straight win thing. So there was some comments from Nancy in the past week or so kind of bringing up that fact. And I don't think he's too happy about that. Which I don't know, maybe just shows a little bit of frustration with the MLS and American soccer and some of the rules that they put into place. Maybe he feels that he kind of done his time there and wanted to move to Europe. Also, this season, Crew exited the League Cup in the league phase. They exited the CONCACAF Champions Cup in the round of 16. So clearly nowhere near as good a season. The question that you'll be having is, why were they not able to have nearly as good a season and build in the past couple of years? We'll never know for sure. However, I did come across one article from the website 44 Crew. Great name. And they had an interesting article out actually in February, so before the season started. And it's interesting, let's just say. It reads, as the 2025 Major League Soccer season kicks off on February the 22nd, Columbus Crew finds itself entering a critical year without having made the moves necessary to maintain competitiveness. While other teams across the league have strengthened their squads, Crew's off-season has been underwhelming, leaving many supporters questioning the front office's commitment to pushing for another MLS Cup. Perhaps the most glaring issue lies in the transfer of star striker Cucho Hernandez, who was sold with no apparent plan to bring in a direct replacement. Cucho's departure leaves a gaping hole in Columbus's attack, and without a marquee signing to offset his loss, the Crew now appear significantly weaker offensively. And so on. Sounds familiar, that selling key players and not replacing them. So I don't know. I'm not saying it's the whole reason for the drop off this season for Columbus Crew. I mean, it wasn't a total disaster. They still finished 7th, but clearly, not replacing key players maybe meant that Nancy's work was cut out for him a little bit. So yeah, that's kind of brings us up to today. Just a few other things I want to mention. Playing style, and I'm going to go far more in depth on the playing style in an upcoming video. But yeah, it's genuinely, I think, quite an exciting, almost radical playing style. This is a quote from Nancy that I found interesting. He said, "Everything is connected because when I was a player, I was not fast. I was playing centre-back, sweeper, and I was good technically and tactically. But I needed the other guys, my teammates, to play, to be good on the pitch. My idea was clear that in the future, when I'm going to be a coach, my team, we play. My team, we get this connection with the ball because I did not like to run without the ball. It was a nightmare when I was doing it." So again, his playing career feeds into how he manages. Also, the Columbus Crew website called Massive Report, they say on the playing style, Nancy has instilled a possession-oriented style of play, making Columbus unafraid to dominate games and very skilled at manipulating space with crucial line-breaking passes and overloads. Columbus shifted to a more modern style of soccer, bold, brash and beautiful. And so on. Added to that, he develops players. Again, reading from the same article from Massive Report, they say, players across the field have flourished under the direction of the 48-year-old coach. Steven Moreira was named the 2024 MLS Defender of the Year. Former striker Cucho Hernandez placed second in MLS MVP voting and is now playing in La Liga for Real Betis, to name a few. Being a crucial piece in the development of young stars like Patrick Schulte, who I think is a highly rated goalkeeper, Taha Habron and Jason Russell-Rowe, his continuity as an asset, once again removing him from the equation could stall such a critical process within MLS clubs. So that to me is a real positive. He develops players. Now, Brendan Rodgers had a positive reputation generally of doing that. But how many players did Brendan Rodgers really develop in his second stint at Celtic? Matt O'Reilly, definitely. Liam Scales at a push. There's maybe some other players you could throw out there, but it was certainly a bit of a complaint that a lot of us had, was that it didn't appear like he was developing, and improving a lot of players, maybe to the same extent that he did in his first spell at the club. So I think it's exciting that Nancy has that reputation. Players clearly like him. He makes them better. He has a unique playing style, as I say, that should be very obvious to us as fans, and it should be exciting to watch. Genuinely mean that. I mean, the idea of a 2-3-5 formation when we're attacking sounds bonkers, but clearly works. And as I repeat, he wins things. This isn't just a gimmick. This is something that works for him and his teams and make them successful. Now, again, I've been doing a lot of reading. From everything that I read, he strikes me as like a real leader who modern players love, and that we will all love as fans, and we'll all be behind him, I think, once this kind of pre-announcement stuff dissipates. I think there's still questions over whether he can handle like the pressure and intensity and scrutiny of Celtic, and I can't say for sure that he will. We won't know for sure until we witness it in real time. But as I say, he's won things so far in his short managerial career. You can't argue with that. 3 trophies in 4.5 years, which is vital for a Celtic manager. He's got a modern playing style, a likeable personality, which is something that's important. He's the kind of guy that we'll all want to do well. And yeah, I think he's earned a shot at Celtic. I know there's a lot of debate about that last point. Should Celtic be appointing someone from the MLS? But I think he's done well at Montreal. He's thrived there, and he's gone, up a level to a more kind of successful MLS club in Columbus Crew, and is, breaking records there, has won trophies for them. And I think at the moment it's fair to say is regarded as like the best coach in the MLS. And the MLS is a much stronger league than Scottish football, without a doubt. So I think with all that considered, as much as, we don't know much about him, and it's very easy to look at the MLS and say, should we just be appointing someone who's never managed in Europe? And I do get that. But I think when you bring everything into consideration, I think he's earned a shot. He's earned a promotion, and he's earned a shot at a bigger club, a much bigger club. But hopefully, he can handle it. And this might be coming through here. This has been an incredibly long video today. Hope you're enjoying it. I'm genuinely quite excited about this. I'm excited to see what he can bring to the club, what he can get out of guys like Alistair Johnson and Kieran Tierney and Arnie Engels and Benji Nygren, and what he can put into, what life he can put into everything at Celtic at the moment. I'm, excited to kind of feel something again and get behind something, and have a really likeable manager there who we can all get behind. He's going to have his work cut out. I think it's fair to say the next few months do worry me a bit, but also hopefully he can still, even though he'll be building things, we can still win matches domestically. I think people will forgive anything in Europe as long as we're still winning domestically, and hopefully we can get to January and then we can really start the rebuild. So yeah, there's comments about whether he'll be able to handle the pressure, having to win every game. As I said yesterday, I think that some of that stuff's a little bit overblown. He'll know that he has to come in and win games, and hopefully he's capable of that. So yeah, that's a bit of Wilfried Nancy's story. Obviously, so much more that we've not covered that I hope to cover with some guests maybe over the coming videos. I'm working round the clock to do that, but hopefully, even if you're not totally convinced yet. That wasn't my intention here. My intention here was just to tell you about Wilfried Nancy so that you at least know a lot more about him. So hopefully you feel like you know him a lot more, and we'll continue that journey. But yeah, for now, I'll head off, and I'll catch up with you soon.